The Three Sisters are a symbolic and archetypal image in the Southwest. Corn, beans, and squash are central in shaping our conception of ourselves as interconnected people. Each plant represents a spirit that inspires us to plant, to cook, to eat, and to celebrate our mutual joys and struggles. Our nurturing of the Three Sisters and one another helps friendships thrive. Despite threats to us as a community, a culture of cooperation grows.
Hello, my name is Dr. Michael Engs, and I'm here with Rachel Pollack, Sidney Engs, Christine Boleyn, our narrator, to talk about the Three Sisters. Here in Mission Gardens, one of the oldest cultivated places in the valley of Tucson, Arizona, plants were grown in order to feed and help people survive and share relationships. 245 years ago, soldiers, dressed much like I am today, marched in under the command of Hugo O'Connor, an expatriate Irishman who worked for the Spanish Army. Of the 27 soldiers, 4 were of African descent. And these soldiers accelerated a process that had been going on for hundreds of years. Because remember, they weren't the first African Americans to come to this area. That would have been Esteban. In 1539, he walked up the San Pedro watershed, crossed the Gila River into what is now Arizona, and then into New Mexico, where he was either killed or disappeared in Zuni. Today, we're here to celebrate Foodways of African Americans in Tucson and the African American Garden, for which we hope many of you watching will be interested to participate in. We of African American descent have been here for many, many years. And as a consequence, because we were a free people, we were able to eat differently, perhaps, than our brothers and sisters in the South at the same time. Because here in Tucson in 1775, we don't know very much about the African American population, but what we do know is that many of them were free people because the Spanish had been freeing their slaves for many years up to this point. Secondarily, we know that there were probably about 20% of the population. In October 1775, the Juan Bautista Anza expedition left Tubac, 40 miles south of here, to found the city of San Francisco. And of those 300 people in that party, about 20% were of African descent. But remember, during this period of time, there were so few of us that if you tell one people's story, you're telling the story of everybody who was here at the time. And in 1691, much earlier, Father Kino had come here to build missions like Tumacacri and Del Bac. And with him, he brought foods that had never been seen before, like beef and pork and wheat and quince, like the ones on the tree behind me, salt and sugar and tea. This collision of foods that were native here, because remember, the native peoples, indigenous people, had been hunting and gathering and cultivating this area for 4,000 years. And this collision of food from Europe and Asia to here in the southwestern desert, the furthest edge of the Spanish Empire at the time, called Pimeria Alta, was called the Columbian Exchange. And the Columbian Exchange revolutionized food and how we think about food, and gave Tucson the designation of a UNESCO gastronomy capital. We have with us today Rachel Pollack, who is former program manager for the Tucson Presidio Trust and the Presidio of Tucson. And Rachel, you're going to tell us a little bit more about the Columbian, what's called the Columbian Exchange and the exchange of food?
Yes, I am, Michael. Many foods we associate with a European diet, such as potatoes, tomatoes, and corn, originated here in the New World among the indigenous people. So that potatoes, tomatoes, and corn were not the only crops they were growing, was not the only food.
Yeah, I can see you've got some of these foods that you're talking about right here on the table.
These are a few samples, just a few, because they had a lot of cactus plants as well. These are a few samples of the New World foods.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the squash, corn, and of course the beans.
Mm-hmm.
Three sisters. They had chili peppers, for example, the chili beans. They had potatoes. They had walnuts, black walnuts. They had acorns and chocolate. So they had a lot of chocolate and the tomatoes. So these are just a few of the New World items. Now, the Old World also brought food. So some
that
of the
would be
food
Europe
items,
and
European countries
yep.
brought a lot of the Old World foods. And when they brought food, they brought wheat, they brought anise and cinnamon, which was very expensive at the time, garlic. They brought sugar, which we call today or use today as a piloncillo, which is what they would have used then. They brought a lot of fruit, pomegranates, figs, apricots. They brought the citrus family, which you see here a lot in Arizona, oranges, lemons, and limes, and of course the grapes for the wine. Now, the Old World foods and the New World foods, between the two worlds, they had general items. For example, both worlds had salt. Salt was not just used for seasoning, it was also used to preserve food. They had all sorts of varieties of beans, and they also had onions between them, even though in the New World they may have been wild onions. Now, when I look at the Old World foods, I always think of Father Kino. And I believe the best thing he could have shared with the indigenous people was the wheat.
Why is that, Rachel?
Because in the summer, corn, squash, and beans could only grow in the heat in the summer. So the indigenous people became nomads because they had no winter crop. You bring in wheat, they plant in December, they harvest in June. And that way, the people could stay in the same place and farm the entire year in the same place, which I thought was great. And then, of course, of the New World items, the Spanish took back chocolate, and when it finally got into the system, they made quite a bit of money off of that chocolate from the New World. So what I always say is before the Columbian exchange, there were no oranges in Florida, no bananas in Ecuador, there were no paprika in Hungary, there was no tomatoes in Italy, and there were no pineapples in Hawaii, there were no rubber trees in Africa, no cattle in Texas, no burros in Mexico, and no chocolate in Switzerland.
So Father Kino's influence was huge, wasn't it?
It's huge. That food affected many, many people all over the world.
That's why we still celebrate together the San Ysidro Festival in the spring to bring the rain. So this mixture of food and the Columbian exchange can be shared among the various people that were here now and also were here then. Yes.
And we're still eating them today.
And we're still eating
in
them
our
today.
Mexican food of this area. Enjoying all of these foods.
Exactly. What a rich culture we've grown here.
Yes, we have.
Around food. So the Foodways are partially here because of the mixture of foods from the Columbian exchange.
Yes.
And today we're going to help see how they taste. So Sidney, tell me, what are we making today?
Today we're going to be cooking the Three Sisters soup. Okay? And the Three Sisters soup has different kinds of squash. We have a gray squash, we have yellow squash, and we have the zucchini squash. It also has onions in it, and garlic, and the corn, and the tepary beans from the Totem people. The recipe that we'll be cooking is from the book called Cooking in the Wild Southwest by Carolyn Needhammer.
One of our favorite experts here in Tucson in the gastronomy world, Carolyn Needhammer. And we've liked her gastronomy tour so much through the Presidio, we did it twice.
Yes, it was very good. So these are the kinds of foods that we're going to be talking about and cooking in our Three Sisters soup.
Let's go and see how it's cooked. So Sidney, our experts tell us that soups and stews were very popular during the early years of Tucson in 1775. Would this soup be typical of what they would have cooked back then?
Yes, it is. The Three Sisters soup. So I'm going to start out with, in a big pot, we're going to start out with some onions. So I have some onions here. And we're going to saute them in a little bit of olive oil. And then we're going to let them get translucent for like 2 minutes. And then we're going to add some garlic. So add the garlic. And then we're going to saute that for like about a minute. And then we're going to put in our squash. We have 3 different kinds of squash here. We have a yellow squash, a gray Mexican squash, and a zucchini squash. So we'll put that in. And then we're going to cook this until it's tender. Okay, so just cook it until it's tender. And then the things that we have to put in are corn. And this is a dried corn that's been rehydrated. You get it and you soak it for several days or several hours. And this is another kind of corn, which is the corn that's off of the corn on the cob. So you can use this kind of corn. And then we have our tepary beans right here. And these tepary beans are from the Sonnevier Co-op farm. That's where you can get those. And these beans have to be soaked for a couple of days before you put them in. So we're going to get ready to put our beans in. And then we're going to put in our corn. Okay, and then we're going to put in our chicken stock. So you use about 4 cups of chicken stock or vegetable stock if you chicken or vegetable. So we'll put that in. Okay. And then we are going to, now if the seasonings are for Mexican oregano, so we put a little bit of that in. Okay, and then 1 or 2 chippings if you would like. So chippings are very hot, so be careful how much you put in. Okay, so I'll put 1 in, and then then we're going to stir it around and let it just simmer for a while, and then we're going to put some salt, a little bit of salt in it, and then we're going to put ground black pepper. And then you just heat it all the way through, and that's our Three Sisters soup.
So, Sidney, stews and soups were very popular back then, but wouldn't some of the people who did these dishes probably put meat in them? Beef, pork, rabbit, venison,
yes,
that sort of thing?
Yes, they would, definitely. And you also can change the beans to a white bean, a kidney bean, pinto bean, or a black bean would be another way to variate this recipe.
Mm-hmm. And what's fascinating to me is so much of this stuff could be grown in gardens like the ones here at Mission Garden, or even in your backyard. So we, through some of these simple recipes that are being handed down to us, could be self-sustainable.
Yes.
And feed ourselves.
Yes, they can. Yes.
Excellent, excellent. So, let's eat. This was an excellent Three Sisters soup, Sidney. You know, you've always taught me gardening, cooking, and being together. It's the strongest part of our community.
Yes.
It makes us a culture of cooperation. in times of trouble.